We want you to plan for success. Welcome to Planning Matters Radio.
Hi, Peter. Good to see you. Today we have $1 million question. Is the 4% rule outdated? As you know, for decades, retirees have relied on the 4% rule to know what was safe, a safe amount to take out during retirement. But now the rule's inventor says that current market conditions may require an even more conservative approach. So let's start at the tippy top. What is the 4% rule?
So the 4% rule is a general guideline for how much income you should be able to create given a lump sum on the starting date of retirement. And it has been projected, it has been utilized by most Wall Street firms and assumptions for retirement that you should be able to generate a 4% cash flow. So with a hypothetical $1 million, that's $40,000 a year of income. And the inceptor of this rule, Bill Bengen, was a financial advisor and analyst, and he incepted the rule back in the early 1990s, nearly 30 years ago, and under a very different set of market circumstances. Interest rates were much higher. The market was doing well. He's been interviewed many times, including on the Planning Matters radio program. I interviewed him several years ago. And he said this was actually before the recent market volatility that we have seen and before COVID. He said that he felt comfortable still maintaining that 4%, but two caveats. It was always intended for institutional investment, not individual investors. So right there, that's the law of large numbers rather than me as an individual specific investor. And then he said it also completely negated the possibility of a large market downturn happening in the first few years of retirement. That's a big if to negate. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the island of California, Erin.
I don't know that I have either.
So back when maps were first being charted of California, cartographers who explored that area went up the peninsula and didn't continue all the way to the end. They actually showed California as an island on the first maps that were drawn. And even though new information came out as little as 3 years later, in some instances, California continued to be drawn as an island for nearly 300 years. So this is an example of people just using old information and continuing to duplicate it rather than taking into account new information, which disproves the old information. And I think with that 4% rule, largely that's what's been happening. Wall Street has simply used what was at one point generally accepted rather than actually including the new information that has happened since, that has proven that this is possibly a problematic way to go about forecasting retirement income.
Well, hey, Peter, thank you for teaching me something new. I had never heard of the island of California. So when you talk about that new information that's coming in, I think chief among them is going to be inflation, right? I mean, this is the headline of the year. CPI hit 8.5% in March. These are numbers we haven't seen since the 80s. So what should retirees be taking into consideration then when they're trying to determine this percentage?
Yeah, well, even the inceptor of the rule, Bill Bengen, said that given these new inflation numbers, retirees also have something else to consider if relying on or utilizing his rule, really a theory. And he said that this is something that we need to strongly consider, as well as the much, much lower interest rate environment that correlates and has fallen over the last 15, 20 years, really, and the additional market volatility that we have seen, all factors to include. So Vanguard, Morningstar, Wharton School of Business, several American College for Retirement Income Planning, several kind of major entities that study retirement, that study finance, have all come out kind of across the board and said, we really need to pull back our expectations, to lower our expectations for how much income a portfolio can generate for us. Now, here's the thing, Erin, it's maybe the model that they are using to create that income rather than the income cash flow rate. Because if we use a market-based type of asset allocation, the traditional 60-40 model, there's volatility and there's low interest rates to contend with. Whereas if we are using alternative tools and methods, there are places out there that you can actually contractually guarantee an even higher cash flow around retirement age. And if you take the market risk out of things and base things on an actuarial life expectancy, you may actually even be able to increase that cash flow rate. So it's really all about that model. But if you go to the Vanguard tools and retirement calculators, Vanguard being very famous for sort of the do-it-yourself investor, and so they give you access to a lot of tools and calculators. If you run their retirement income calculator and you project the numbers out with a traditional 60-40 portfolio, they give you about a 90% probability of success following the 4% rule. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's a 10% probability of failure, which means running out of money. And if the weatherman tells me that there's a 10% probability of rain, I may feel comfortable leaving my house without my umbrella. But if my retirement model, if my plan for retirement is based on a theory or a rule with a 10% accepted probability of running out of money, I'm really carefully examining that plan and deciding whether I'm comfortable with those assumptions and those projections.
So what I'm trying to suss out then from what you're saying, Peter, I mean, I understand that this is incredibly complicated, but it's so important because it addresses the number one fear for retirees, right, of not running out of money in retirement. Is there a number? Is there a percentage that you're recommending to clients?
Well, I think that 4% is a place to begin the conversation. If people are expecting that, oh, well, I've heard the market has averaged 10%, so I should be able to generate a 10% cash flow, we need to have a real come to earth meeting about what expectations are and what the difference between rate of return and cash flow is. But if we start that conversation with approximately a 4% expectation for cash flow, we can probably say that those expectations are pretty reasonable. And then here's the important part, Aaron, make adjustments based on real world conditions as we go along. First and foremost, we have to have a proper allocation to begin with in order to start to think that we can achieve this type of cash flow. But maybe we have a little bit of diversification with a safe money bucket that's not going to lose if the market goes down, with some type of long-term yet conservative money bucket that isn't going to fluctuate a great deal, and then our risk bucket. In good years, maybe we can create the income exclusively from the risk bucket. If we've got a 10 or a 20% rate of return on that side, it may be a good time to take some of those gains off the table and use that for income. But in down market years, we've really got to tap into a different source because we don't want to remove dollars at a loss, lock in those losses, and remove those dollars' ability to participate in any recovery. And so it's really about the proper allocation. During our working years, our paycheck pays for our bills and actually supports our ability to take risk with investment. But that really changes in retirement. Now the investment portfolio or the life savings represents the paycheck. It's an opposite equation there. And we really need to take a different approach to how we're handling the potential risk of market losses early on, and especially how to create that income with a realistic expectation that we don't know the future of the market and we need to be prepared for kind of any scenario, up, down, or sideways.
Right. I like that you're mentioning income because that is such an important part of the equation. And so what I'm hearing you say too is that I wish we all could follow one rule, right? If we could all just say 4% and forget it, that would be great. But of course, it has to be a little bit more personalized. And something that you and I were talking about offline here was how things can change when your money is managed by a professional. So what am I looking at here?
Yeah. Not only does it need to be more personalized, but it does need to adjust for conditions. So what we're looking at on this chart is kind of a traditional buy and hold methodology versus a methodology that actually adjusts for real world conditions as they happen.
Right.
otherwise known as tactical management. And what this chart shows is that tactical management actually helps investors outperform that traditional long-term buy and hold strategy where they're just riding out any market conditions, ebbs and flows, ups and downs. If we actually make proactive moves to adjust during those periods of time, buy in when things are low, or move more aggressively, sell out when things are high, when there are profits on the table, even if it's just a strategic kind of regular quarterly rebalancing, it can dramatically improve results. So investment is not set it and forget it. That's what we're looking at on that chart. What we really need to understand is that we need to be a little bit more proactive. And if you don't do that yourself, then even with the potential additional cost of consulting with a professional advisor, you can probably make out even better in the long term, with better results long term, having that proactive, tactical, and strategic management on your money.
Right. Very well said. So, Peter, if somebody would like you to kind of take a look at their income and their expenses to figure out what's right for them, what's the best way to reach you?
You can call the office, 919-300-5886, 919-300-5886. You can email me, info@richonplanning.com, info@richonplanning.com, or you can go to the website, richonplanning.com. It looks like richonplanning.com. And you can download a copy of my book there, Understanding Your Investment Options. It actually goes through a little bit of the transition from accumulation, preservation, distribution, the tax implications involved with all of those, and then what the spectrum of the financial world has to offer for each of those stages.
Yeah, such a great resource for everybody. Peter, thank you.
Always a pleasure, and thank you.
This has been Planning Matters Radio.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.